The big banks are coming under fire again as bonus season approaches. And this time, it's not just Occupy Wall Street that is expressing discontent. New York City Comptroller John Liu and the New York City pension funds are calling on J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley to hold executives financially responsible for what they say are excessive risk-taking by calling for new clawbacks. Comptroller Liu is here with me now. Good morning, Mr. Comptroller.
Good morning, Scarlett.
Well, these firms that we're talking about here, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Morgan Stanley, do have clawback provisions in place. So the proposal that you're making, what would be different here?
And in fact, these three companies have clawbacks that are pretty good in general, but we think that more needs to be done. If you think about the fact that these companies paid over $100 million to settle charges just very recently, clearly more needs to be done. So what we're asking for is, number one, the standard by which losses are judged is too high for any real actions to be taken, certainly clawback actions to be taken. Number two, we're also asking for executives, the bosses of the managers that are accused of the misconduct, to actually suffer some kind of consequence as well, their pay being clawed back if in fact they profited from some kind of unethical or improper conduct. And then finally, we're specifically asking that these companies disclose what they are doing with regard to clawback decisions, whether they have made a decision to make a clawback of executive pay or decided conscientiously not to.
And Mr. Comptroller, where would the money go once clawed back?
The money would go back to the shareholders. It is oftentimes at the expense of shareholders that executive pay is outlandish. And so as share owners, the New York City pension funds own about $500 million of shares in these three companies. We have a right to understand exactly what is happening with executive pay, the standards by which that pay is paid out, and to make sure that it's not being overly done at the expense of share owners.
What about the taxes that the bankers paid on the bonuses that were already granted? I mean, would that be refunded to these bankers then?
Of course, if there are adjustments in individual pays, that's an issue that they take up with the IRS, and I would presume that there's an adjustment in the income tax being paid. But here we're talking about large amounts of money that have been paid to these executives and the managers, and in many cases, money that should not have been paid in the first place. If you look at the report issued recently by the Council of Institutional Investors, it showed that some of these poor compensation practices, particularly practices that contain perverse incentives, that helped contribute to the financial collapse a few years ago. What we would like to see is a strengthening of the public's confidence in the financial industry, and we think that these strong clawback provisions are going to be an important part of that restoration of the public confidence.
Mr. Comptroller, who else has lent their support to this proposed clawback provision?
For example, we have the United Auto Workers Retiree Medical Fund. That's a fund that represents about 840,000 employees and retirees. It's a large fund. We do tend to work collaboratively with other institutional investors, and we'll continue to do so. And by the way, Scarlett, this is not the only shareholder proposal that we have out there. Over the next couple of weeks, we'll announce much more. We do have a vigorous shareholder, a proxy season shareholder activist agenda to advance.
Okay, we'll note that, Mr. Comptroller. Also, we do want to mention that recent news reports allege that the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, is looking into whether illegal donations were funneled into your campaign treasury. At this stage, do you agree that your campaign fundraising experienced problems that would warrant an investigation?
I was very saddened to read about these investigations last month. And in fact, the person that was involved clearly misled my campaign, which has not done anything improper, and we are fully cooperating with the investigation.
Now, you're the person in charge of the city's money as comptroller. Were you aware that this was going on?
There was nothing improper conducted by my campaign, and I certainly was not aware. Nonetheless, we are cooperating fully with the investigation because we certainly want to get to the bottom of this as well.
All right, thank you so much. Comptroller John Liu joining us.